In 1974, more than 98,000 people were injured or permanently disabled by traffic accidents in Ontario. Nearly 2,000 people were killed. For young people like Carolyn and Paul here, car accidents are the largest single cause of death. But no one expects trouble. Paul didn't even bring a spare tire. Constable Andy Doby is a community relations officer. Teaching safety is part of his job. He offers a ride to his next stop where they can get a spare. Doby is giving Bernie Katz copies of a book called The Human Collision, a book which gives people the information they need to decide if seat belts are worth the trouble it takes to wear them. Bernie Katz's wrecking yard is full of this information. There are so many wrecked cars, Bernie needs a television surveillance system to keep track of them.
Officer, what's the making of those two cars?
The significance between these two cars is you'll note the car on the left has damage to the windscreen.
These two cars have just been involved in similar accidents, and the story they tell is right out of the pages of The Human Collision. Both these cars show only minor front-end damage. Each was involved in a low-speed crash. But this car shows that two collisions can happen during a single accident. The first collision happens when a car hits a solid object. It buckles and bends, slowing down as the body and frame absorb the shock of the collision. In the car's collision, the stopping distance is about 2 feet. It takes 1/10 of a second. The second collision happens an instant later. When the car starts to crush and slow down, the people inside do not. Their momentum carries them forward until they hit something solid enough to stop them. This is the human collision. In a 30-mile-an-hour crash, a person hitting a windshield has a stopping distance of 4 or 5 inches. Crashing into the windshield frame, a person's stopping distance is only about 1 inch. In the human collision, people stop 10 times faster than the car. This fast stop over such a short distance creates a tremendous impact between a person's body and the interior of the car. The human collision, not the car's collision, caused the damage you see here. And it's the human collision that hurts.
The human collision, it's hard and it's mean, and happens to victims of an accident scene.
To understand the forces involved in the human collision, try walking into something. Now, imagine what it would be like to run head first into something solid. You would certainly be seriously injured. Now, imagine what it would be like to hit something at several times your best running speed, at 30 or 40 miles an hour. The results would be fatal. This is what happens in the human collision. If you hit your head on a hard edge, all of the force of the impact is concentrated on a small area. A fractured skull is very likely, even at low speed. If you hit something softer, a padded dash or a windshield, your chances of survival are better. However, broken glass is not very kind to your eyes and face. Abdominal injuries are also common in the human collision. Even with an energy-absorbing steering column, internal organs can be badly crushed. Most accidents involve the front end of the car, but a car can be hit from any direction. In some cases, the term human collision has a special meaning. When a car is hit, everyone in it moves toward the point of impact. In frontal collisions, back seat passengers can fly forward, crushing people in the front seat. At 30 miles an hour, a 150-pound person will slam against you with a force of 3,000 pounds. When the human collision involves impact between an adult and a child, the results can be disastrous.
People hit people and objects they meet. If they buckled for safety, they'd stay in their seats.
The human collision can also take place outside the car. Some people call it getting thrown clear when they're ejected from their car and slammed onto the pavement. Sometimes they are thrown clear and their car rolls over them. If you still think it's better to get thrown clear in a collision, just think for a moment why motorcycle accidents are so dangerous. People on motorcycles get thrown clear every time. There are no guarantees, but people who stay inside the safe, protective shell of the automobile are many times less likely to be killed than people who get thrown clear. Today, the easiest, most effective way available to avoid the human collision is to wear your seatbelt. Doug Hennessy crashes cars for a living. His main protection? A seatbelt. And the ability of a car to take tremendous punishment without collapsing the passenger compartment. How do seatbelts make it possible to survive a violent collision? The first scientific clues came in the early 1940s from a study of people who had survived air crashes or long falls. It was found that these spectacular cases of survival all had two things in common. First, the people had landed in a way that spread the force of impact over a large area of their body. And second, they had all landed on something which cushioned the fall and gave them a longer stopping distance. The conclusion? It's not the fall that kills you.
It's that sudden stop at the end.
In the 1950s, Colonel John Stapp of the U.S. Air Force proved that the human body could withstand tremendous forces of deceleration if properly restrained by a safety harness which spread the force over the strong, bony parts of the body. Car seatbelts work on the same principles. By holding you in your seat, seatbelts let you ride down the collision. The front of the car becomes your cushion as it crumples and bends and brings you and the passenger compartment to a longer, softer stop. With your seatbelts on, your stopping distance is the same as the car's, and the force of the impact is spread over a much larger area of your body. You avoid the human collision. Properly worn, snug over the hips, lap belts permit the strong bones of the pelvis to safely absorb most of the force of the collision. A shoulder belt lets the shoulder and ribs absorb some of the force and keeps the upper torso from pivoting forward. Seat belts themselves rarely cause injuries. When they do, it's usually because they're not worn properly. A belt worn too high on the abdomen can cause internal injuries. You might also be injured or bruised by a belt that is twisted or worn too loose. The lap belt should be worn snug and low on the hips, and the shoulder belt should have no more than 2 or 3 inches of slack. For best protection, both lap and shoulder belts should be worn at all times by adults. Children too need proper restraints to avoid injury. Because their bones are not fully developed, children under the age of 5 or children who weigh less than 50 pounds need the extra protection of a special child restraint. An approved, well-designed child restraint which meets government standards spreads the forces of a collision over a large area of the body, and it protects the child's fragile skull. Older children, whose bones are tougher, can use an ordinary lap belt.
So listen, good people, and buckle up right. It's a chance that you have of prolonging your life. Lap belt is snug and the shoulder belt slack. It It's all you got going that's holding you back.
All youngsters should sit in the back seat. Laboratory evidence using test crashes and lifelike dummies has proven the ability of seatbelts to prevent injury in auto accidents. But what about evidence from the real world? What actually happens on the roads? In Sweden, a study of 28,000 motor vehicle accidents showed that people wearing seatbelts received only about half as many serious injuries. It was also found that people not wearing seatbelts were killed at speeds of less than 20 miles an hour. No one who was wearing a lap and shoulder belt was killed in accidents at less than 60 miles an hour. Wearing a seatbelt does not guarantee you'll live through every collision. Some accidents are just too severe. But accident investigation teams in Canada have found seatbelts could save about half of the people killed or seriously injured in collisions. In one case examined, a young woman of 23 was driving home from visiting friends. On passing another vehicle, her car hit a puddle and began to skid out of control. The car veered across the pavement onto the shoulder. Then it skidded sideways and began to roll over. The woman was thrown out of the window onto the pavement. The car rolled over her, inflicting fatal injuries. The passenger compartment was not crushed. It could have protected the driver had she remained inside. The investigators concluded the absence of intrusion strongly suggests that the use of available restraints would have prevented serious injury to the driver. These available restraints had been buckled together behind the driver to defeat the seatbelt buzzer. In almost every case examined, the investigators have found that the use of seatbelts greatly reduces the risk of death and injury in all types of accidents. Even when a car bursts into flames, as this one did. Accidents which end in flames or a plunge into water hardly ever happen. In Ontario last year, only one death by drowning or fire happened for every 7,800 accidents. Investigators have found that seatbelts don't trap you. They make it easier for you to escape. To escape, you have to stay conscious. To stay conscious, you have to avoid a human collision. Research has also shown that seatbelts can help to avoid accidents. A close call can turn into an accident if you are thrown out of position and lose control of the car. Seatbelts keep you in position and in control. That's why pilots and professional stunt drivers always use them. You can learn a lot from a tour of a wrecking yard. You can see evidence of the human collision, and you can see that everyone who rides in a car risks death and injury. A lot of people who thought it couldn't happen to them rode in these cars. People who thought they only had to wear their seatbelts on long highway trips. People who didn't know that most accidents happen close to home. Some of the most dangerous roads you'll ever drive on are right in your own neighborhood. Sure, each time you get into your car, the risk that you will have an accident is slight. That's what Paul thought. But over the next 10 years, 3 out of 24 people now living in Ontario will be killed or injured in a car accident. Over the next 40 years, 8 of these 24 will be killed or injured. That's more than 2.5 million people. Sure, you'll find some seatbelts uncomfortable or inconvenient to use, but over a normal lifetime, you have more than a 50-50 chance of being injured in a car accident. Wearing a lap and shoulder belt will reduce your risk of serious injury by half. The decision is up to you.
The human collision shatter your dreams. There's ways of disrupting one's happiness schemes. The thoughts of tomorrow are built on today. Take the time, not the chance. It's much safer that way.
Hey,
Yeah?
don't you think we should put our seatbelts on?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
The human collision, it's hard and it's mean. It happens to victims of an accident scene.
Yeah.
That belt is snug and the shoulder belt slack. It's all you got going that's holding you back. 'Cause it ain't the flying that kills you or brings on them headaches, my friend. No motion will spoil the ride that you take. It's that sudden stop at the end. It's that sudden stop at the end. That sudden